Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019, and we're going to be looking at a 2020 Democratic primary prediction more in depth than in the past between Senator Bernie Sanders and Vice President Joe Biden. So this is a very interesting matchup. These are two top contenders that have always, conflicted in terms of matchups for my channel. I've always put these two against each other because it's always interesting to see how Bernie Sanders would do against Joe Biden, because Joe Biden comes from the more centrist, more Hillary Clinton part of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders, of course, coming from his side of the Democratic Party. These two top names have been run time and time again for the 2020 nomination, and it always seems like Joe Biden does a tad bit better. When you look at opinion polling, Joe Biden has consistently outperformed Bernie Sanders in terms of an election between Donald Trump and whichever Democratic candidate that is up. But when it comes down to the Democratic primary polling, there are times where there are inconsistencies, but usually Joe Biden is leading. I do think that Bernie Sanders definitely can survive a little bit better in terms of numbers staying at a consistent rate. I do think Bernie Sanders can maintain a lead, whereas Joe Biden definitely could dip depending on what he says and what he doesn't say. But as of right now, Joe Biden is the #1 Democratic candidate in terms of likingness by Democrats and also support amongst Democrats nationwide. And then if you look at the Trump versus Biden and Trump versus Sanders polling, although it is only a 2-point difference, Joe Biden is ahead of Bernie Sanders at this point in time. However, on a completely different note, the map we're going to be using right now is a very interactive tool. In fact, it will be giving us all of the delegate counts, and we will actually be able to allocate based off percentage points, which I think is an amazing tool. It comes with the political simulator, I guess you could say, website that I'm using for right now. I'm going to make an official video discussing it a little bit later in the future, but for right now, we're just going to be using the map. It's very, very helpful. I mean, in the past, literally before today, I had to use 270 to win and just did it by electoral votes. Now we actually have 4,532 delegates up for grabs. And this scenario definitely is going to be, it's going to be interesting, to say the least. I'm going to try to get through it as fast as possible because there are so many places to go. I mean, just regarding the states, there are other areas out here: American Samoa, Democrats abroad, Guam. I mean, looking around the areas, there's just so many places that we have to look at and discuss percentages. So I'm going to try to get through this pretty quickly. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So you'll pretty much have a general conclusion as to how this will turn out. I'm going to avoid big states for right now. States like California, Texas, Florida, New York, Illinois, those states I'm going to avoid for right now. But we'll be starting off alphabetically and then going through them. So Alabama for right now, personally, I have done percentages. So I'm going to list them off. Right now, I'm just going to completely blanket the Bible about the South. Joe Biden is going to do phenomenal here, based off the sole reason he came from the Barack Obama administration. Hillary Clinton did the exact same thing. I get it. The argument comes time and time again. Bernie Sanders did not have the name recognition he did as he does now. That doesn't change the fact that they would prefer Obama-like candidates over a progressive. That just doesn't change the fact. These voters here are not progressive voters. Contrary to what you believe, they just aren't. If you look at the data from previous elections, there is no general, significance between the Democratic Party, between Democrats voting and progressive candidates. There is really no correlation between the two. The Democrats here do not vote for progressive candidates, which is why it's such a big deal when states like Florida nominate a progressive mildly progressive, I put progressive in quotations, candidate, or someone backed by Bernie Sanders. That's why it's such a large deal, because it's not expected. And it's not going to happen time and time again. I mean, looking at Florida, that likely could have been a fluke. It was a 34%. He won with 34. Andrew Gillum won with 34% of the vote in the Democratic primary. It's not a majority, barely a plurality. Looking at the numbers there, it doesn't seem too hopeful for progressives here. So I'm saying Joe Biden gets 74% of the vote. I rounded to the nearest percentage. I did not use 74.5%, 74.43%. I'm just doing pure 74%, which gives Joe Biden 38 delegates. It's going to be a little bit harder, just characterizing all the delegates pretty quickly. Bernie Sanders gets 14 delegates. That goes to Joe Biden, and Bernie Sanders gets 14. We move over to Alaska. I would say Biden gets 3% of the vote here, loses to Bernie Sanders with 80%. 11% of the vote goes, 11 delegates go to Bernie Sanders. Joe Biden gets a mere 3 delegates. We move over into the state of Arizona. Joe Biden wins here with 55% of the vote, enough to give him 37 delegates, compared to Bernie Sanders' 30 delegates. In the contrary, Let's go ahead and characterize that. Moving over to the state of Arkansas, 60% of the vote here is a win for Joe Biden. He wins with 19 not electoral votes, sorry, 19 delegates to Bernie Sanders' 12 delegates. Moving down to the state of Colorado, Bernie Sanders wins here with 58% of the vote, giving him a total of 39 electoral votes. Bernie Sanders is definitely going to do a very good job in this type of area, especially with it being progressive back in 2016. No reason as to why he would do worse. Now, Connecticut, 52% of the vote for Joe Biden. It's a very close state, but Joe Biden wins 25 delegates to Bernie Sanders' 24. Again, a very close race here. By the way, we will be getting to super delegates by the end of the video. The District of Columbia awards 80%, so 14 electoral. I'm sorry for repeating electoral votes. I'm just so used to it. 14 delegates to Joe Biden and 3 to Bernie Sanders. Delaware, this is Joe Biden's home state. We can say that he would win with around 70% of the vote, which is 12 delegates, which leaves Bernie Sanders with a total of 5, so not necessarily the exact worst. We're skipping Florida, we're skipping Georgia. Over to Hawaii, Bernie Sanders does a phenomenal job here with 75% of the vote, 16 delegates in all. That goes and leaves Joe Biden with a total of 6. I am really liking the interactive ability and capability of this website. 80% of voters in Idaho, we say, go to Bernie Sanders, giving him a total of 16 delegates. Joe Biden gets 4. Right now, Joe Biden has 186 electoral votes. Bernie Sanders has 170. Actually getting pretty close. We're skipping over Illinois. We move over to Indiana, and Bernie Sanders gets 54% of the vote here, which totals up to 38 electoral votes. We can characterize 38 electoral votes now. Joe Biden gets the rest of them, so that gives him 32 for right now. Going over to Iowa, I do think that Joe Biden would do pretty well here. I do think he's going to be able to appeal to voters here. And I get it. Bernie Sanders did come very close to beating Hillary Clinton. I just don't see it happening against Joe Biden. I do think Joe Biden is much more popular than Hillary Clinton. Going over to Kansas, Joe Biden loses here to Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders gets 23 delegates with a total of 70% of the vote. Joe Biden gets 10 delegates. Moving over into the state of Kentucky, Bernie Sanders wins with 55% of the vote. Bernie Sanders wins with a total of 25 delegates to Joe Biden's 21. Moving down over into Louisiana, Joe Biden does a phenomenal job here with 70% of the vote, total of 35 delegates, leaving Bernie Sanders a mere 15. Let's go ahead and fill up that map now. Maine, 70% of the vote goes to Bernie Sanders, a total of 7 to Joe Biden, 17 to Bernie Sanders, so a 10-delegate lead. And the updated right now, again, is getting very close, 314 for Joe Biden, 306 for Bernie Sanders. Over in the state of Maryland, 65% of the vote going to Joe Biden with a total of 51 delegates. That's expected. This state really loves Obama candidates and Obama-backed candidates, and obviously that would be Joe Biden. Although Obama said that he would probably like fresh blood, he's probably going to back Biden, and this is a one-on-one scenario. Let me turn off the volume here so you don't hear Discord in the background. Massachusetts, Bernie Sanders gets 53% of the vote. Joe Biden gets 43 delegates here. Bernie Sanders gets a total of 48. A pretty close state. I believe that one flips from where it was before. Over in Michigan, we look at the state of Michigan right now. Bernie Sanders gets 66 delegates, which totals up to 53% of the vote. Joe Biden gets the rest at 59. And again, it's still close. I mean, it's down to the wire, 467 to 448. Minnesota, that is a good state for Bernie Sanders. He wins with 65% of the vote, total of 49 delegates. Right now, we can give Joe Biden a total of 26. And I believe Bernie Sanders has officially taken the lead other than earlier on in the video. Mississippi, 85% of the vote goes to Joe Biden, which gives him a total of 31 electoral votes. Obviously, that's really good. Bernie Sanders only getting 5 from this state, so keep that in mind. Missouri, 48% of the vote going to Joe Biden, giving him a total of 33 electoral votes and a total of 35 for Bernie Sanders. Moving over to Montana, Bernie Sanders wins with 55% of the vote, totaling up to 9 delegates. Joe Biden gets 7. Moving down over into Nebraska, part of the red wall here, 42% of the vote goes to Joe Biden, giving him 11 electoral votes. Bernie Sanders gets 14 with the remaining 58% of the vote. Nevada, 55% of the vote here goes to Joe Biden, totaling up to 20 delegates. Very interesting how a number of these states do not have that much of that many delegates compared to how much people actually focus on them on the presidential election, like at the state of New Hampshire, which only has 24 delegates, but 10 of them will be awarded to Joe Biden, leaving 14 for Bernie Sanders. And right now, updated count 605 for Joe Biden and 590 for Bernie Sanders. Again, still very close. Moving over to New Jersey, 65% of the vote expected to go to Joe Biden, giving him a total of 70 electoral votes. Bernie Sanders holds on with 37. New Mexico, 51% of the vote for Joe Biden, giving him a total of 15. Bernie Sanders at 14. Very, very close state. New York, we're skipping over. North Carolina, right now, 53% of the vote for Joe Biden. I do think he could do pretty well here, giving him 58 electoral votes. Bernie Sanders is going to do pretty well as well. Going to hold on and get some delegates there. In North Dakota, up there, Bernie Sanders does very well. Phenomenal. 74% of the vote, giving him a total of 10 electoral votes. Not 10 electoral votes. I do not know. I feel like I just am, autopilot for electoral votes, saying that 4 for Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden has around a 50 delegate lead, which is pretty good for him. But again, it always can narrow up as we get later into the election match. Right now, in the state of Ohio, 51% of the vote for Joe Biden. That gives him a total of 69 electoral votes and 67 for Bernie Sanders. Still very close. Oklahoma, 60% of the vote for Bernie Sanders, which gives Bernie Sanders a total of 22 delegates. And right now, Joe Biden at 15. Oregon, Bernie Sanders wins with 59% of the vote, which gives him a total of, Oregon. I clicked on Washington. I don't know why I clicked on Washington. I should not have clicked on Washington. Let's go ahead and click on Oregon. I was very confused for a second. I was like, that's not the amount that we have. Joe Biden gets 21 delegates. Bernie Sanders gets a total of 31. And that puts Bernie Sanders closer to Joe Biden, but still not overtaking him. Pennsylvania, we're going to skip over. Rhode Island, right now, 9 delegates go to Joe Biden, which leaves a total of 12 for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, of course, winning in that state. South Carolina, big win for Joe Biden. 74% of the vote here. 40 delegates to 14 for Bernie Sanders. Over in South Dakota, we have 7 for each candidate. Not an exact tie, 51% for Bernie Sanders to 49% for Joe Biden, but still going to narrowly into a tie between the two in terms of delegates. Tennessee, though, that is an interesting state. Right now, I would say Joe Biden wins here with 68% of the vote, giving him a total of 44 electoral votes. It's a win for the South. Not a win for the South, a win for Biden in the South, as you might expect. Texas, we're skipping over. Utah, Bernie Sanders is a very good job here. 23 delegates compared to Joe Biden winning a mere 6 in the state of Utah with 19% of the vote. Vermont, do not expect much for Biden there. He gets 2 delegates. Bernie Sanders gets the remaining 14. Big win for Sanders there. Over in Virginia, though, 65% of the vote goes to Joe Biden. That gives him a total of 64 electoral votes, if only it had met 65. 35 for Bernie Sanders. That puts Biden officially over the 1,000 mark. Keep in mind, 2,555 are remaining, and you still need to cross over that majority with or without superdelegates to secure the nomination. Washington, Bernie Sanders wins 74% of the vote here. 66 delegates we're going to award to Bernie Sanders. That leaves 23 for Joe Biden. And now, again, it is getting closer. Moving over to West Virginia, I do think that Bernie Sanders is going to do worse here than he did in 2016, just based off the fact that Biden is not Hillary Clinton, will not have as big of a gaffe, even though he is known for gaffes, not one that bad, especially particular to the state of West Virginia. In the state of Wisconsin, Joe Biden gets 42% of the vote here, which gives him a total of 32 delegates. Bernie Sanders gets 45 delegates here, equivalent to 58% of the vote. In the state of Wyoming, right now, it's pretty even. 7 for Bernie Sanders, 6 for Joe Biden, 55% to 45%. In Puerto Rico, right now, we can say that 60% of the vote will go to Joe Biden. That gives him a total of 31 delegates, and that gives Bernie Sanders a total of 20. Right now, if you look at it, it has actually got narrower. Before it was 20. Now it's 31 separating the two. That is very, very interesting. 70% of the vote in the American Samoa goes to Joe Biden, but it's only 6 delegates in total here, which gives 4 delegates to Biden and 2 to Sanders. Moving down over to Democrats abroad, you can really expect Bernie Sanders to do well here, leaving a total of 4 for Joe Biden and 9 for Bernie Sanders. Going over to Guam, 60% of the vote for Biden, 4-2 in this not state. Over into the, Northern Mariana Islands, 56% of the vote for Biden, which gives him 3-3. So a tie in terms of delegates, but not exactly in percentages. There we go. Those are characterized in the Virgin Islands, 90% of the vote for Joe Biden, so 5-1 in terms of delegates. And we've skipped over some. I don't know why we skipped over South Dakota. I swear. Oh yeah, it was a tie, so we didn't skip over South Dakota. Right now we have 1,151 delegates for Joe Biden, 1,117 for Bernie Sanders. We're gonna get to the bigger area, so we're gonna go ahead and look at the South. Georgia for right now, we're going to give to Joe Biden. Joe Biden's going to do very well here, especially with it being a southern state. 77 delegates here. So that's definitely going to boost up Joe Biden past a little bit past where he needs to worry. This is going to have to go to a second ballot, by the way. There is no way that anyone wins with an outright majority here. Going over to the state of Illinois, that one definitely does a little bit better for Bernie Sanders, but it's about even. 48% for Joe Biden, which gives him 74, and gives Bernie Sanders a total of, 81. So I guess Bernie Sanders getting a little bit of an edge there, but still very close. Over in the state of Texas, is a big win for Joe Biden. This is traditional Democratic area, 150 delegates for Joe Biden. That's really going to hurt the Sanders campaign. The Sanders campaign is not going to be able to appeal to a number of these voters in the state of Texas, and it's going to really, as you can see, push up Joe Biden a lot. Moving over to Florida, that one could narrow down, but it's going to be, 145 delegates for Joe Biden. Again, even though Andrew Gillum did okay here, I mean, he won with 34% in the Democratic primary, does not mean that Bernie Sanders is going to improve here or even win this state itself. It's still going to hold on to its identity from the past. Florida narrowly goes to Joe Biden. Going up to the state of California, Bernie Sanders, I would say, narrowly wins here with 52% of the vote, giving him 212 delegates. Sorry, not 212, 216 delegates. But Joe Biden is going to get a total of 200 here, which again puts them a lot closer to that magic number. Going over to Pennsylvania, keep in mind Pennsylvania is where Joe Biden was born. He's going to win pretty well there. He's going to get 92 delegates. Bernie Sanders gets 61. Not exactly the worst defeat, but still not good for the Sanders campaign. Over in the state of New York, if you look over here, the state of New York, 121 delegates for Biden. 121 for Sanders. I don't know why I clicked on Biden first. 121 for Bernie Sanders and 103 for Joe Biden. For right now, I think it'll be a 54-46 margin with Bernie Sanders winning. But again, it's still not enough to make up the margin. 1776, 1992, very interesting numbers. And that pretty much covers all of the states themselves. These are the state-by-state wins, margin wins. You can go back to every single state. But what gets interesting is the superdelegates. Now, the superdelegates in the past have done very well for establishment Democrats. Unfortunately for Bernie Sanders, I'm not seeing a pathway out of losing the nomination due to superdelegates. Yes, they saw his capability back in 2016, but did they vote for him? No. He barely got any back in 2016. Okay, the most you could give him now, I would say, I guess you could say is being generous, but 200 superdelegates. The remainder go to Joe Biden. That officially puts Joe Biden past the number that he needs to win by. Joe Biden officially wins the nomination because of superdelegates. Keep that in mind. This is very generous to Bernie Sanders. Okay, there definitely is a scenario where Bernie Sanders gets under 100 and Joe Biden wins by more than that. And although the primary election was a lot closer, it's not going to look like that because Joe Biden will win by such a large margin due to superdelegates. So when you look at the overall map, sure, it looks like there might be a divide. California, New York, Illinois didn't exactly all vote for the one nominee that did win, but these superdelegates definitely push Joe Biden over the top heavily. That's exactly what happened in 2016. Although Hillary Clinton did win with 55% of the popular vote, you can't say that superdelegates weren't a factor and won't be a factor for 2020. So that wraps up today's video. Thank you guys for watching this video. Before I end it off, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all the superdelegates right now just so you can see the map without them and see exactly how, yes, Joe Biden was closer, but there's no way he's all the way over here based off just the primary results. So again, thank you guys for watching this video. Comment down suggestions below, and I will see you all tomorrow.